Do you believe justice is truly blind? What if the person who experiences the injustice is the very one who decides the fate of those who wronged them? Imagine being pulled over, treated unfairly, and then, by a twist of fate, you hold the power to deliver justice. This is a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about fairness, power, and the unexpected turns life can take. Get ready, because this is not just a story, it's a mirror reflecting the surprising possibilities of our world. The sun beat down on the dusty asphalt of the Arizona rest stop, shimmering off the heat-hazed horizon. Sarah Jenkins, a woman with a quiet strength and eyes that held a hint of weary wisdom, stretched after a long drive. She was on her way to Phoenix, a new city, a new job, a fresh start. Her old but reliable sedan, packed to the brim with her life's possessions, seemed to hum with the promise of tomorrow. She walked towards the small, unassuming building, her mind already on the next leg of her journey, a quick coffee, a bathroom break, and then back on the road. As she pushed open the door, the cool air inside was a welcome relief. The rest stop was almost empty, just a couple of truckers nursing mugs of coffee at a corner table and a lone attendant behind the counter, scrolling on his phone. Sarah ordered a black coffee, her voice soft but clear. She paid, picked up her cup, and headed towards the women's restroom. The simple act of washing her hands, the cool water on her face, felt like a small luxury after hours of driving. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, adjusting a stray strand of hair, and then turned to leave. That's when she saw them. Two figures, their silhouettes framed by the harsh desert light pouring in from the entrance. They were uniformed officers, their belts laden with equipment, their faces stern. Nothing unusual, of course, seeing police at a rest stop. But as they stepped fully inside, their eyes seemed to sweep over the room, then narrow, and finally land directly on her. A prickle of unease, faint but persistent, ran down Sarah's spine. "Ma'am, can we have a word?" One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a closely cropped haircut, said, his voice flat and authoritative. Sarah felt her heart quicken, just a little. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. She was just a woman, tired from driving, getting coffee. The second officer, taller and leaner, with a more angular face, stepped forward. "We've received a report of suspicious activity in this area. We need to ask you a few questions." "Suspicious activity?" Sarah looked around the empty rest stop. "I just stopped for coffee," she explained, gesturing vaguely with her cup. "I'm on my way to Phoenix." "Where are you coming from?" the first officer asked, his gaze unwavering, almost accusatory. "Los Angeles," Sarah replied, a knot beginning to form in her stomach. Why were they so focused on her? There were other people in the rest stop, but their attention seemed locked. "And what's your business in Phoenix?" the second officer chimed in, stepping closer, making her feel cornered. Sarah felt a wave of frustration. This was getting ridiculous. "I've accepted a new position there. I'm relocating." "Do you have any identification on you, ma'am?" Sarah sighed inwardly. She reached into her purse, pulling out her driver's license. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed it over. The first officer took it, his fingers brushing hers, and she felt a shiver of discomfort. He scrutinized the license, then looked from the picture to her face, back to the picture. It felt like an interrogation, not a casual chat. "Sarah Jenkins," he read aloud, his voice devoid of any warmth. "And your vehicle, is that the black sedan parked outside, California plates?" "Yes, that's mine." "We're going to need to search your vehicle, Miss Jenkins." Sarah's eyes widened. "Search my vehicle? On what grounds? I haven't done anything wrong." The words came out sharper than she intended, fueled by a rising indignation. The first officer's expression hardened. "We have probable cause, ma'am. We believe there might be contraband in your vehicle." "Contraband? That's absurd," Sarah protested, her voice rising now. "I'm just moving. Everything in my car is my personal belongings." "Please step outside, Ms. Jenkins," the second officer ordered, his tone becoming more forceful. "If you cooperate, this will go a lot faster." Sarah felt a surge of fear, mixed with a deep sense of injustice. This was wrong. She knew her rights, but the two officers, towering over her, their faces grim, made her feel powerless. She looked around, hoping for someone, anyone, to intervene, but the rest stop attendant was still glued to his phone, seemingly oblivious, and the truckers hadn't even looked up. She was alone. With a heavy heart, Sarah walked out into the searing heat. The officers followed, their footsteps echoing behind her. They stopped by her car. The first officer walked around to the driver's side, while the second officer stayed close to Sarah, his presence a constant pressure. "Open the trunk, please, Miss Jenkins," the first officer commanded. Sarah hesitated. This was an invasion of her privacy, a violation. But she also knew that resisting too much could lead to worse trouble. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the trunk. The officers began their search. They rummaged through her neatly packed boxes, tossing aside clothes, books, and kitchenware with callous disregard. Sarah watched, her chest tightening with each item they roughly handled. Her childhood photo album, carefully wrapped, was yanked out and flipped through quickly before being tossed back in. A small, framed picture of her late grandmother, meant to sit on her new desk, was placed carelessly on the hot asphalt. Sarah wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, to treat her things with respect, but the words caught in her throat. "What exactly are you looking for?" she managed to ask, her voice strained. The first officer grunted, elbow deep in a box of bedding. "Just doing our job, ma'am." Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. Her car, once a symbol of hope, was now a chaotic mess. Clothes were strewn across the back seat, boxes overturned. Sarah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a deeply personal attack. Suddenly, the second officer, who had been searching the glove compartment, pulled out a small Ziploc bag. He held it up, a triumphant look on his face. Well, what do we have here?" he said, his voice dripping with false concern. Sarah's blood ran cold. She stared at the bag. Inside was a small amount of what looked like a green, leafy substance. "Marijuana." "That's not mine," Sarah exclaimed, her voice cracking with desperation. "I swear, I've never seen that before in my life." The first officer walked over, examining the bag. "Looks like marijuana to me, Miss Jenkins. And it was found in your vehicle." "Someone must have planted it," Sarah pleaded, her mind racing, trying to comprehend how this could be happening. "I don't smoke. I don't do drugs." "Please, you have to believe me." But their faces remained impassive, hardened. "We're going to have to take you in, Miss Jenkins," the first officer stated, his voice final. "Take me in? For what?" "I told you, that's not mine." Sarah's voice rose to a near shout. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. Her perfect fresh start was crumbling before her eyes. "Possession of an illegal substance," the second officer replied, his voice chillingly calm. "And possibly resisting arrest." "Resisting arrest? I haven't resisted anything." Before she could protest further, the first officer was producing handcuffs. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs. She had never been arrested, never even been in trouble with the law. The cold metal clasped around her wrists, tight and unforgiving. The click echoed in the silent, sun-baked air. Humiliation washed over her. She was a respected professional, a woman who had worked hard for everything she had, and now she was being treated like a criminal. Her eyes darted to the attendant in the rest stop, who was now peeking out, a flicker of curiosity on his face. She felt exposed, vulnerable, utterly alone. They led her to the patrol car, the flashing lights reflecting off the chrome, a cruel mockery of the bright Arizona sky. As they pushed her gently into the back seat, the door clicked shut, sealing her in. The world outside, the open road, her new life, seemed to recede, replaced by the suffocating reality of her situation. She watched as the officers, their backs to her, continued to mess with her car, seemingly searching for more. A dark thought, a terrifying suspicion, began to form in her mind. This wasn't just a random stop, it felt targeted. The drive to the station was a blur of silent despair. Sarah sat in the back of the patrol car, her cuffed hands resting in her lap, her mind reeling. She kept replaying the events at the rest stop, trying to make sense of the sudden, aggressive search, the planted evidence. It felt like a nightmare, the kind you wake from in a cold sweat, relieved it wasn't real. But this was real. The handcuffs digging into her wrists, the scent of stale air and something metallic in the police car, the unyielding silence from the officers in the front seats. It was all too real. When they arrived at the station, the fluorescent lights inside seemed to hum with a dull, oppressive energy. Sarah was led through a maze of corridors, past a few desks where officers sat, typing on computers, their faces illuminated by the screens. No one looked up. No one seemed to notice the quiet desperation in her eyes. It was as if she was invisible, just another anonymous face being processed through a cold, impersonal system. She was taken to a small room, bare, except for a metal table and 2 chairs. The air was thick, with the scent of disinfectant and something else, something vaguely unpleasant, like old sweat and stale coffee. An officer, not one of the 2 from the rest stop, came in and took her fingerprints, his movements practiced and efficient. He didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. Sarah felt like an object, not a person. Then came the booking process. Her name, date of birth, address, occupation. All the details of her life, laid bare, now seemingly tainted by this absurd accusation. She was told her bail would be set, and she would have to wait for an arraignment hearing. The words floated past her, distant and surreal. Arraignment? Hearing? This was all happening so fast, so inexplicably. Finally, she was led to a holding cell. The clang of the metal door as it shut behind her echoed in the small space. The cell was cold, with a thin mattress on a metal bunk and a small, unadorned toilet in the corner. She sat down on the bunk, her body aching, her mind exhausted. The reality of her situation finally hit her with full force. She was in jail, for something she didn't do. Tears, hot and stinging, finally spilled down her cheeks. All her hopes for a new beginning, for a fresh start in Phoenix, felt shattered. She had envisioned unpacking her boxes, setting up her new apartment, starting her challenging new job. Instead, she was here, in a cell, her freedom stripped away, her future uncertain. Hours stretched on, each one an agonizing eternity. She tried to sleep, but her mind raced. Who would have planted the drugs? Why her? Was it truly random, or was there something more sinister at play? The faces of the 2 officers kept flashing in her mind. Their cold eyes, their dismissive attitudes, the way they had carelessly thrown her belongings around. A chilling realization began to creep in. Their actions had felt too deliberate, too targeted to be a simple roadside stop. As the night wore on, the sounds of the jail became more pronounced. The muffled conversations of other inmates, the distant clanging of doors, the occasional shouted order from a guard. Sarah felt a profound sense of loneliness, an isolation she had never experienced before. She was a black woman, alone in a system that sometimes seemed to chew up and spit out people who looked like her. The fear, which had been a dull ache, sharpened into a terrifying certainty. What if no one believed her? What if this was the end of everything she had worked for? She thought about her family, her mother back in Georgia, who would be heartbroken if she knew. Sarah had always been the strong one, the independent one, the one who made her own way. Now, she felt utterly helpless. Just as the first hint of dawn began to seep through the small, high window of her cell, a guard appeared at the door. "Jenkins, bail's been posted, you're out." Sarah looked up, disoriented, but a flicker of hope ignited within her. Bail? Who had posted it? She didn't know anyone in Arizona. She was led back through the same corridors, her belongings returned to her, her purse, her phone, her car keys. As she stepped out into the still dark morning, the air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the previous day. A car was waiting. A nondescript sedan, parked a little way from the entrance. As she got closer, the passenger window rolled down. "Ms. Jenkins, I'm David Miller, your attorney." Sarah stared at the man in the car. He was older, with kind eyes and a reassuring smile. "My attorney?" she repeated, still dazed. "But I didn't call anyone." "No, you didn't," he confirmed, opening the back door for her. "I was contacted by a mutual acquaintance, someone who believes in your innocence and wanted to ensure you had proper representation." Sarah got into the car, still reeling from the sudden turn of events. "Who?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Let's just say, a very influential person who heard about your situation and recognized the injustice of it," David said, pulling away from the station. "Right now, what's important is that you're out, and we have work to do. We're going to fight this, Miss Jenkins. We're going to clear your name." Sarah looked out the window, watching the city lights begin to shimmer in the pre-dawn light. A tiny spark of hope, fragile but present, began to glow within her. She was out. She had an attorney. But the fear remained, a cold hand around her heart. She was innocent, but would anyone believe her? The image of the two officers, their faces etched in her memory, returned. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Little did she know, the universe had a shocking twist in store for everyone involved, a twist that would redefine justice in ways no one could have predicted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with David Miller. He was meticulous, patient, and deeply empathetic. He listened intently to Sarah's account, asking detailed questions about every moment at the rest stop. He explained the legal process, the challenges they faced, and the uphill battle of proving innocence when evidence had been planted. He filed motions, gathered preliminary evidence, and began to build her defense. Sarah learned that the mutual acquaintance who had contacted David was an old law school professor of hers, a formidable woman named Professor Eleanor Vance, who had heard about the incident through her network and immediately suspected foul play. Professor Vance had always seen something special in Sarah, a sharp legal mind combined with a deep sense of fairness. It was Professor Vance who had instilled in Sarah the passion for justice that had led her to pursue a career in law, a career she was just about to embark upon in Phoenix. Yes, Sarah Jenkins wasn't just some random traveler. She was a highly accomplished legal professional, having recently completed her clerkship at a prestigious federal court and accepted a judicial appointment in the very state she was now being accused of a crime. This was the shocker, the twist that would make this story so unbelievable. But for now, that information was being kept under wraps, a strategic decision by David Miller. David's investigation uncovered some troubling patterns. The two officers, identified as Officer Thomas O'Malley and Officer Mark Peterson, had a history of questionable arrests, particularly involving people of color. There were several complaints, though none had ever resulted in disciplinary action. This gave Sarah a chilling realization. She wasn't just a random target, she was part of a larger, disturbing pattern. The day of the arraignment arrived, and Sarah felt a mix of dread and a steely resolve. She walked into the courthouse, head held high, David by her side. The courtroom was a blur of faces, the prosecutor, the clerk, a few reporters scribbling notes. And then, she saw them, Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson, sitting on a bench, looking self-assured, almost smug. Their eyes met hers for a fleeting second, and Sarah felt a surge of anger. They had done this to her. They had taken her freedom, her peace of mind, and tried to destroy her future. The arraignment was brief. Sarah pleaded not guilty, as expected. The judge set a date for a preliminary hearing, where the prosecution would present their evidence, and the defense would have a chance to challenge it. Sarah left the courthouse feeling a renewed determination. She wouldn't let them get away with this. The time leading up to the preliminary hearing was excruciating. Sarah tried to focus on her new job, her judicial appointment, but the shadow of the arrest loomed over everything. She couldn't officially start her new role until this matter was resolved. The irony was not lost on her. She, a future judge, was now fighting to clear her own name from a false accusation. David worked tirelessly, gathering more evidence, interviewing witnesses, and preparing his arguments. He had obtained the dashcam footage from the officer's patrol car, but it was suspiciously dark and grainy during the crucial moments at the rest stop. A clear sign, David argued, of tampering. He also found a recent report of a similar incident involving the same officers, where a small amount of drugs had been found in a minority driver's vehicle during a roadside stop. This was their pattern. Finally, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. Sarah dressed carefully, choosing a smart, professional suit. She wanted to project confidence, strength, and unwavering integrity. As she walked into the courthouse, a different sense of anticipation filled her. This wasn't just about her. It was about exposing the truth, about holding those in power accountable. The courtroom was packed. More reporters were present this time, their cameras flashing as Sarah entered. She took her seat beside David, her gaze sweeping over the room. The prosecutor, a young, ambitious-looking woman, was already at her table, shuffling papers. And then, at the defense table, sat Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson, their faces now betraying a hint of nervousness. They knew this was more than just a routine hearing. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone rose as the judge entered. Sarah watched, her heart pounding. This was the moment. The person who would hear the evidence, who would decide if there was enough to proceed with a full trial. This judge held her future in their hands. As the judge settled into the high-backed chair, Sarah felt a jolt. A familiar face. No, it couldn't be. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared, disbelieving. The judge looked up, her eyes scanning the room, and then they landed on Sarah. A flicker of recognition, a subtle raising of an eyebrow, but otherwise, her expression remained perfectly neutral. Sarah felt a strange mix of disbelief and a growing sense of vindication. It was Judge Eleanor Vance, her former law school professor. The same Professor Vance who had arranged for David Miller to represent her. The woman who had been her mentor, who had inspired her, and who now, by an astonishing turn of events, was the very person presiding over the hearing of the officers who had wronged her. A murmur went through the courtroom. Some in the legal community recognized Judge Vance, a newly appointed federal judge, known for her sharp intellect and unwavering commitment to justice. But no one, absolutely no one in that room except for David Miller and now Sarah, understood the full, incredible weight of the situation. Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson, who had been looking smug moments before, now exchanged uneasy glances. They too recognized Judge Vance, but they couldn't possibly know the extent of her connection to Sarah. A cold realization was slowly dawning on their faces, replacing their arrogance with a dawning fear. The judge cleared her throat, her voice calm and authoritative. Good morning, everyone. We are here today for the preliminary hearing in the case of the state versus Sarah Jenkins. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept over the courtroom, lingering for a moment on the two officers. Let's proceed. Sarah felt a surge of something she hadn't felt in weeks, a powerful, almost overwhelming sense of hope. This was it. The universe, in its own mysterious way, had brought her to this moment. The very people who had tried to destroy her now faced a judge who knew the true meaning of justice. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike any other, a confrontation that would expose the hidden truths and challenge the very foundation of power and prejudice. The prosecutor began her opening statement, outlining the charges against Sarah Jenkins. She spoke with a practiced cadence, detailing the alleged discovery of marijuana in Sarah's vehicle, presenting it as an open and shut case. She called Officer O'Malley to the stand as her first witness. Officer O'Malley, looking less confident than he had at the rest stop, took the stand and was sworn in. He recounted his version of events, sticking to the official narrative, a suspicious vehicle report, a routine stop, the discovery of contraband during a lawful search. He painted a picture of two dedicated officers simply doing their duty. As he spoke, Sarah watched him, her mind replaying every detail of that dreadful day. The way he had dismissed her pleas, the casual way he had tossed her belongings, the smug look on his face when they found the planted evidence. It was all a carefully constructed lie. When it was David Miller's turn to cross-examine, the atmosphere in the courtroom noticeably shifted. David, with his calm demeanor and sharp legal mind, began to chip away at Officer O'Malley's testimony. "Officer O'Malley," David began, his voice even, "you testified that you received a report of suspicious activity. Can you tell the court the exact nature of that report?" Officer O'Malley hesitated. "It was anonymous. A tip about potential drug trafficking." "Anonymous," David repeated, raising an eyebrow slightly. "And this anonymous tip specifically mentioned a black sedan, California plates, driven by a black woman." "No, sir. It was a general description. We just happened to spot Ms. Jenkins' vehicle, and it fit the description." "Conveniently so," David mused, then continued. "You also testified that you conducted a lawful search. Did you obtain a warrant before searching Ms. Jenkins' vehicle?" "No, sir. We had probable cause." "The suspicious activity and Ms. Jenkins' demeanor." "Ms. Jenkins' demeanor?" David pressed, his voice sharpening slightly. "Are you suggesting her being tired from a long drive and perhaps understandably upset about being stopped without cause constituted probable cause for a search?" Officer O'Malley shifted in his seat. "She was acting evasive, sir." "Evasive or simply questioning why she was being targeted?" David countered. "Now, officer, let's talk about the discovery of the alleged contraband. You testified it was found in the glove compartment. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you personally found it, Officer Peterson?" David clarified, looking at Officer Peterson for a moment, then back at O'Malley. "Yes, sir." "I mean, Officer Peterson found it." Officer O'Malley corrected himself, a slight flush rising on his neck. "So you didn't find it yourself, Officer O'Malley?" David stated, not as a question, but a fact. "And you say it was a small Ziploc bag. Can you describe its exact location within the glove compartment?" Officer O'Malley stammered, his eyes darting to Officer Peterson. "It was tucked away, behind some papers." "Behind some papers," David repeated, then looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, we have dashcam footage that, while unfortunately grainy during the initial stop, does become clearer as the search progresses. We believe it shows something rather important about the quote-unquote discovery of this evidence." The judge nodded. "Let's review the footage." The courtroom lights dimmed, and the grainy video played on a large screen. It showed Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson at Sarah's car. The initial moments were indeed dark and unclear. But then, as the officers began to search, the image improved. The camera captured Officer Peterson rummaging through the glove compartment. And then, a quick, almost imperceptible movement, his hand momentarily out of frame, then returning, holding up the Ziploc bag. The angle, however, was just slightly off, making it impossible to see the exact moment he pulled it out from within the compartment. But it did show him already holding it when his hand came into view. "Your Honor," David said, his voice cutting through the silence of the room, "I draw the court's attention to that exact moment." Officer Peterson's hand disappears from view for a fraction of a second, and then reappears holding the bag. It's a very subtle manipulation, but it's consistent with planting evidence. We also have expert testimony regarding the typical methods used to conceal and plant small items like this, and how it can be done to appear as if it was discovered naturally. The prosecutor objected, arguing speculation, but Judge Vance, her gaze fixed on the screen, calmly overruled it. The defense is presenting a relevant line of questioning. "Proceed, Mr. Miller," David continued, focusing on the inconsistencies in the officer's narrative and the suspicious nature of the search. He introduced the evidence of the similar incident involving the same officers, painting a pattern of behavior. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Officer O'Malley squirmed on the stand, his confidence completely gone. When Officer Peterson was called to the stand, he fared no better. David confronted him directly about the dashcam footage, asking him to explain the brief moment his hand went out of frame. Officer Peterson fumbled for an explanation, claiming it was just an awkward angle, that he was simply reaching deeper into the compartment. But his voice lacked conviction, and his eyes kept darting towards the judge. Then came David's final, devastating blow. Officer Peterson, can you tell the court, under oath, if you have ever, at any point in your career, planted evidence on an individual? The prosecutor immediately objected, calling it badgering and irrelevant. But again, Judge Vance overruled. The defense is pursuing a line of questioning directly related to the credibility of this witness and the alleged discovery of evidence. Answer the question, Officer Peterson. Officer Peterson, his face pale, stammered, "No, Your Honor, I have never." "You deny ever planting evidence?" David pressed, his voice unwavering. "Yes, sir. I deny it." "Interesting," David said, then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence we would like to present. A witness who was at the rest stop, who saw something highly unusual during the search of Ms. Jenkins' vehicle." A ripple of surprise went through the courtroom. Even the prosecutor looked taken aback. David had kept this witness a secret. "Call Mr. Rodriguez to the stand," David announced. A man, who looked like one of the truckers Sarah had seen at the rest stop, walked into the courtroom. He was a gruff-looking man, but his eyes were honest. He was sworn in. "Mr. Rodriguez," David began, "can you tell the court what you witnessed at the rest stop on the day in question?" Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Well, I was just having my coffee, minding my own business. These two officers, they had this lady, Ms. Jenkins, by her car. They were searching it. And I saw something." The tall officer, the one sitting right there, he pointed a finger at Officer Peterson. "He was in the glove compartment. And I saw him. He had something small in his hand, like a little baggie. He quickly kinda, tucked it in behind something else in there, and then pulled it out like he just found it." A gasp went through the courtroom. Officer Peterson's face went white. Officer O'Malley looked stunned. "You are absolutely certain of what you saw, Mr. Rodriguez?" David asked, his voice low and impactful. "Yes, sir. Clear as day. I thought it was strange at the time, but I didn't think much of it until I heard about this hearing. Then I knew I had to come forward." The prosecutor launched into a furious cross-examination, trying to discredit Mr. Rodriguez, suggesting he was mistaken, or had poor eyesight, or was somehow biased. But Mr. Rodriguez held firm, his simple, honest testimony unwavering. He had seen what he had seen. After Mr. Rodriguez's testimony, David Miller rested his case for the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was silent, save for the hushed whispers of the reporters. All eyes turned to Judge Vance. Judge Vance leaned forward, her expression unreadable. She looked from Sarah to the two officers, then back to Sarah. Her gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment, a subtle message of recognition passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary circumstances. Having heard the testimony and reviewed the evidence presented, Judge Vance began, her voice resonating with authority. "The court finds that there is insufficient probable cause to proceed with a criminal trial against Ms. Sarah Jenkins. The testimony of Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson contained inconsistencies, and the dashcam footage, coupled with the compelling testimony of Mr. Rodriguez, raises serious questions regarding the discovery of the alleged contraband. Furthermore, the pattern of similar incidents involving these officers is deeply concerning." A collective sigh of relief, almost audible, swept through the courtroom from Sarah's side. Sarah felt tears welling up, but these were tears of immense relief and vindication. She had been cleared. "Therefore," Judge Vance continued, her voice firm, "this case is hereby dismissed. Ms. Jenkins, you are free to go." Sarah looked at David, a grateful smile on her face. David squeezed her arm reassuringly. But Judge Vance wasn't finished. She turned her gaze to Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson, her expression hardening. "However," she said, her voice now cold and piercing, This court also finds that there is substantial evidence of misconduct on the part of Officer Thomas O'Malley and Officer Mark Peterson. The actions described in this hearing, if true, represent a grave abuse of power, a fundamental betrayal of public trust, and a perversion of justice. The two officers who had slumped in their chairs at the dismissal of Sarah's case now sat bolt upright, their faces etched with a new kind of fear. Therefore, Judge Vance announced, her voice ringing with the weight of her authority, this court is ordering an immediate and full internal investigation into the conduct of Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson. Furthermore, I am personally referring this matter to the Department of Justice for an independent investigation into potential civil rights violations and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted in a flurry of whispers and the frantic clicking of cameras. This was unprecedented. A judge dismissing a case, then turning around and initiating an investigation into the officers themselves, and involving the Department of Justice, all on the same day. Officer O'Malley and Officer Peterson looked utterly devastated, their faces pale with shock. Their smugness had been replaced by genuine terror. They had tried to destroy Sarah Jenkins' life, and now, the very system they had manipulated was turning on them, led by a judge who, unbeknownst to them, knew the true extent of their wrongdoing. Sarah watched them, a profound sense of justice settling over her. She hadn't sought revenge, but she had certainly found vindication. The journey had been terrifying, humiliating, and deeply unfair, but in this moment, witnessing the consequences unfold for those who had wronged her, a powerful truth emerged. Justice, while sometimes slow and circuitous, could indeed find its way. The surprising twist was not just that she was cleared, but that the very people who had caused her suffering were now facing their own reckoning, under the watchful, discerning eyes of a judge who had once been her mentor, and who now held their fate in her hands. The story of Sarah Jenkins was no longer just a personal ordeal. It had become a beacon, a startling reminder that the scales of justice, even when seemingly tipped, could swing back with an astonishing force.